Hello, friends.
I'm Taylor.
And I'm Brittany. Together we are two sisters who are here to help you learn some tips and tricks to help navigate this crazy journey called life.
We bring the perspective of a licensed mental health counselor, aka therapist and a new mother.
And a slightly eccentric mom of two. When you combine us as sisters, we like to consider ourselves as quite the dynamic duo. So join us as we talk about all life has to offer.
Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and hit that follow, like, or subscribe button wherever you listen to podcasts for updates. You can also see all of our expressions and interactions posted on our YouTube channel under Uhane Counseling.
If you're liking what you hear, leave us a 5-star review. It helps us know what content you like and spreads the love to others to get resources and help for their mental health. Okay, Tay. So happy August. It's my birthday month. We'll just throw that out there,
It's birthday month for everybody.
I know. It is birthday for you because you gave birth to Banks. And
he's one this month. Well, it's just funny. I always crack up my closest people in my life are Virgos, and then I have you, little Leo, in there, and it just cracks me up.
I know. I'm your little Leo oddball, but it's fine.
But I get along with Virgos because my closest people, Banks, Madsen, and Mom are all Virgos.
And you get along with me as a Leo. Excuse you.
I do. Well, we're Cancer, so we get along with the majority of people. So,
and then I'm Leo, so I'm just, it is what it is.
Nice. Anyways, this is kind of funny that we brought that up though, because this whole month I actually made around like the themes of a special episode we're doing with one of my other therapists that works for me. Her name's Kayla.
Oh, I'm so excited.
I'm so excited. So she's really into astrology, and it's like something we joke about and like me and you and we like, but she actually like is very knowledgeable on it and has like researched this stuff a ton. So she's going to do a case study on us for our birth, like where we're at, and like how we're like, so it's gonna be so fun. And just talk about that like concept and how it can bring like self-awareness or just like your journey. So the theme this month is self-discovery and self-improvement. Like we're going to talk about different ways you can do that and like the journey of it, I guess.
Yes. And I love that. So we'll touch on a little bit of everything. We got a resources episode coming up. We've got this cool episode today where we're just kind of diving into that self-discovery. Mm-hmm. We've got the astrological stuff coming. We've got, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm really excited because I feel like after a year of doing this, like we had our year anniversary, we kind of know what we're doing now and like where we're headed. And I feel like I'm getting a lot more like regiment. I mean, this is kind of crazy that I burst two things in 1 year. Like we burst the podcast and like social media, like life. And then we did my baby. And I feel like that lineup, my husband, it's like, why did we do this? But he was so excited about it and it's been so good. But I feel like now I'm starting to get my feet like grounded in it.
You're having another baby though. That's the like, we'll see. Yeah. You might be seeing more of me for a little bit, people. Lucky.
It'll be great. Yeah, we threw that surprise in there.
Lucky.
Hello, baby girl, but she'll be cute. So yeah. But as I was like thinking about this, and I was like, I really feel it's just funny that we were talking about birthday month and everything in astrology, and I really think there's a lot of different ways to have self-discovery and to like understand ourselves and the journey of our life, and that's where I think there's some fun techniques.
Yeah, and in the path for like finding yourself is going to look different for everybody. Like you might find it, some people might find it through religion. Some people might go the totally opposite, right? And they might have more of their own personal spiritual journey in different ways. I mean, there's so many different ways that we can do this. So let's just dive into it.
Yeah. Well, I was so little different start off, but I like how we did it anyways. But I was looking up, like I'm researching it, and then I found like some of these quotes and I loved them. So I thought we could just talk about him for a second. So Carl Jung is he is one of the like iconic founders for psychoanalysis, but he's like he's a Jungian. He created his own theory based off some of Freud's concepts, but then like delved into them more and changed them, which he's iconic and he's actually a really good one. I've said that like 3 times now, but he talks a lot about
is Carl Jung iconic?
Oh, I know. Right? Sorry, but
I didn't even notice you said that.
I know, but then I was like, wait. So, but the thing I love about Jung is that he delves into like we have this unconscious and subconscious. So he has this quote that says, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate."
Oof.
Oh, like oof. Oh, I just got chills. It's so good, like
yeah,
and so true. Until you realize what you're doing and why you're doing it. You're going to think that's fate happening to you. And in reality, that's you doing it to yourself. Like, so
for good
humbling.
or for bad.
Yeah. So, and he didn't say whether it's good or bad. He's just saying you're misascribing, like fate versus your own subconscious and conscious behaviors and how they tie. And like we talk about this all the time, the compensatory behaviors and things that we make up for and like things we're trying to like understand about ourselves. And he just said it so eloquently. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate.
Oof. Yeah.
Humbling.
That is deep. That
I
is
know.
deep.
I was
The other
like,
day
I
I
know.
actually said to I was talking to a friend of ours, well, actually your brother-in-law, and I had said something like, "I'm just along for the ride." And he is like, "Wait, stop for a second." Like he's like, "Brittany, you are not along for the ride. You are in the driver's seat. Why would you say that this is just fate?" And I was like, "Oh, that was deep." Right? Like, and it's coming from him who's usually pretty goofy and stuff. And I was like,
He can be pretty deep sometimes.
but so it was so true though. It was like
Yeah.
that whole like until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life. Like and I was like, "You're right." Like, and so I had caught myself because
Well,
I was saying something to his wife the other day, and I was like, "Oh, hey, like, this just happened, and who knows? But who knows what's gonna happen, right?" And then I was like, "I'm just along for the ride." And then I was like, "Wait, no, I'm in the driver's seat. Like, that's up to me."
but
Yeah.
it's also that reminds me of like, do you remember the holiday and the old man? He's like, you are meant to be a main star of your own movie. Like, be the
I
star
love
of your
that
own
movie. Yeah,
movie. It's sweet little old man who is a movie writer. If you haven't seen the holiday with Jack
it's
Black
so
and
cute.
like, there's
It's yeah,
iconic people in there, Jude Law and like I forgot the main. It's so cute though. But
yeah.
this old man is
Cameron
like
Diaz and yeah.
Cameron Diaz, and then I forgot that she's isn't she like a
Oh my
Emmy
gosh, Emma
winner?
Blunt? No,
No,
no.
oh,
I'm like seeing her face, but I'm forgetting. It's been
I
a long
know.
time since I've seen it, but it's so cute. But
It's
anyways,
so good.
holiday.
But
Okay, continue.
he's saying like you're acting like a supporting star when you're meant to be the star of your own movie. Your own life in your own movie. And it just reminds me of that like yeah, how many things are we doing that allow us to be in the back seat, not in the like driver's seat, but on autopilot, and we don't even realize it, you know? And
Yeah,
like
we're just
I
accepting just fate. We're along for the ride,
yeah,
like
and that's where it's like, I don't wanna accept things just as fate. Like,
yeah.
you know,
That was
because if you
totally,
have it
like
pulled out
it changed my perspective that day, and I was kind of ticked, like, don't tell him that that changed my perspective to your brother-in-law, but, like, it was one of those that I was
beat his
like
head.
yeah, you don't wanna, like, fill his head with stuff, but I was like, that was really good for me to remember, like, yeah, I'm in charge. I'm in charge. I
I
am the
think
star of
it's
my own movie. Mhm.
I think that's a terrifying statement for a lot of people though, including me. Like it's a double-edged sword of like, so you're saying that this is all my fault then. No,
I
life isn't
know.
like, you know what I mean? Like, and I've had clients come back and be like, so this is all my fault. Like, no. And yes, like there's a lot of like confounding variables within this
It's not
aspect, right?
but I
Like,
think, like, what we do with it from that point is what matters.
and that's
It's kind of
that's
like
where it's like, this
and
is an
some things are
empowering
not our fault.
statement.
Like, I was
Yeah.
reading some stuff yesterday about, like, potential like, trauma that you've, like, picked up from parents as a child or, like, all of this type of stuff, like, that wasn't your fault. That wasn't your
Mhm.
burden to carry or things that have cut we've talked about
It happened
attachment
to
theory
you. Yeah.
before or, like, anything like that. Like, yes, that was a part of your story, but then, like, what do you do with it? How do you
Mhm.
pull yourself out of that? You can't just keep blaming it on your past.
But I remember this parable one time too, where it was talking about carrying rocks in your shoe, and every time something happened to you, it was like another pebble in your shoe
Oh,
or in
yeah.
your
I know that
pocket,
one.
and it would just weigh you down and hurt, right? And it's your choice to take off the shoe or empty out your pocket and clean it out. Like that is on you at the end of the day. You're the one that's choosing to carry it around. Nobody's forcing you to carry it around your shoe. That pebble got put there for whatever reason, but then what do you do with that pebble and how long do you carry it around with you and how long do you let it hurt you or be an inconvenience to you? And I think that's where this is like such an empowering statement to being like things happen and like we develop the way we develop and you can look at all the reasons why, but then what are you going to do with it? You know, and how are you going to understand that about yourself? And I think that is the really, really cool thing about this statement is like you have more control over your destiny and your fate than what you can ascribe. I love that.
Mhm. I love that too. So good.
Yeah.
And that goes to the next quote too, which is all I mean, it's along the same page, but okay, go to the next one. Mhm.
The only journey is the journey within by Rainier Maria Wright or Rilke.
The only journey is the journey within. That's a
And
good one.
then the story ends up being a story of self-discovery with Elijah Wood. And that's like, you know, the talking about I think Lord of the Rings and all of that,
Yeah, I was like,
right?
is that a Lord of the Rings quote or something? I'm not really a Lord of the
I,
Rings.
I don't need I don't know Lord of the Rings to be honest with you. I think it's like referring to something he's been in or some story or something.
Okay.
And my
The
guess is
story
probably
ends
Lord of
up
the
being
Rings.
a journey of self-discovery. The story ends up yeah, I like that.
But this is so my two favorites are Young and this one. It is good to have an end to journey towards, but it is a journey that matters in the end by Ursula
Oh,
K.
so true.
But I love that. Like, yeah, it is
Yeah.
good to have an end to the journey towards, like, to go towards, but, like, at the
Mhm.
same time, like, the edification, the real meat of the thing, like, like, and that's what I was thinking about, like, yeah, with my baby, like, yeah, I want him to be raised to be a happy, healthy adult, but the thing that makes me happiest is living every single day with him home wrecking my home and, like, doing all the silly little things that he does, and
He's
that's
so
what gives me
good at
gratification. He's so good at it, and he's
it.
so funny, and his little teeth smiles, and his little, like, "Oh, he ate so much food today and smeared it everywhere." Like, that's what gives us the edification, the real meat of the story, and I think that's where, like, when we look at our lives, we wanna kinda pass over and go to just the highlights, but I'm like, "No, the real good stuff is, like, in the dirtiness, where my baby's
Mhm.
made the whole house a mess or whatever," and I'm like, "That's where there was so much joy and silliness,"
It's
like
like in the journey. Yeah, and I
yeah.
mean, and in an adult perspective, like, there was something I was listening to the other day, and I can't remember what it was, if it was an audiobook, might have been an audiobook. But just talking about, like, not missing out, like, if we're constantly looking like, I'll be happy when this semester's over, like, if you're in school, or I'll be happy when I graduate high school, or I'll be happy college, or I'll be happy when my kids aren't newborns anymore, or I'll be happy when I finally
Mhm,
get that job promotion. Like, it's that whole thing of like, no, it's great to have those things, right? Like, I'm not saying that, like, graduating or finishing a class or getting a job promotion is a bad thing, but, like, we have to stay happy and, like, find the joy in that journey. Like,
mhm.
so true. Like you said with the babies, but it's like that carries our whole lives. Mm.
I mean, I think for me, that gives me the courage and the guts to keep going when things aren't good. Like, as a therapist, like, the meat of the story when I had a session where somebody was breaking down and I actually finally connected to him emotionally, like, that is the real meat of it, not the "you're now better and you're great." It's the we had these raw, rare moments that we connected on, or with my baby where it's like we had these moments of giggles that were so crazy as a mommy, like, it made all my sacrifice worth it because he's just spastic, like, all
Yeah.
those things, that's the point, and I think that's where if we're on autopilot and if we are, like, living with our unconscious driving us, then we're not actually getting this full edification, we're not getting this full experience that we could get, and I we all do this, like,
Oh,
even
we
though I'm
totally do.
aware of this, we all do this, and that's where
Yeah.
I think, um, just try and finding how we can tap into this is really cool.
Yeah. I think that's a great reminder. Okay.
Yeah, but I do think
Well,
it's
that's where things
interesting.
start. Yeah. Mm.
I think it's interesting though, because I was like, as I was coming up with this, I was like, you know what? Almost every single story that is iconic within our media, like books, movies, like literature, like all these things, like deep poems and things, they all have this like same hero's arc where they had something happen. And like we
Mhm.
learned about it in school and like the
The
hero's arc
hero
being
cycle. Yeah, I was just talking about this in a class. I'm teaching a leadership class
yeah,
this year to, like, middle school kids, and I was literally just having this discussion with the co-teacher I'm teaching with. Like, yeah, the hero cycle, the hero journey, like.
explain it. Yeah.
Oh, you want me to explain it?
Yeah, so people understand what we're talking about because we all actually mirror this same concept in our own lives, which is why we're all fascinated by it.
Yeah, so it starts out like I pulled up just the hero cycle real fast, okay? And this
That's a
is
good
like
idea.
iconic from like if we think back to classic literature, I mean now I'm going to like teacher mode for a second, I guess. If we think back to classic literature, like think back to the Odyssey. The Odyssey is like a classic hero's journey. Do you remember reading the Odyssey?
Oh my goodness, it's funny you just bring this up because we literally have a quote that refers to the Odyssey in this.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So
Yeah.
Odysseus, and for all of you that don't remember, Odysseus was like one of the original hero cycle stories. So at first, like the story, and this is in our own lives, right? Like we're introduced to the world of the story, also known as exposition. So we're like become a part of the world, right? And then there's a call to adventure. The hero discovers a hidden world of possibilities. So that's kind of one of those, like in our own lives, like we might be like, oh, I'm gonna
A
venture out on this
goal, a
going to college
desire, something,
or
motivation.
something.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
there's
one
a
of
lot of
those
kids
things.
going to college this year, right? We were just talking to some of those today, some of our like friends' kids, and like they have that call for adventure. And then at first, then it's like the next step would be a refusal of that call. So they're like, oh,
Mhm.
I don't know, like this is gonna be a little scary. Is this important to me? Do I actually do this? Like, and we just had this discussion with a friend's daughter today where she was leaving for college, right?
Mhm.
And then she was like, "Ooh, but do I don't know, like it's nice to be home, but right? And so, like, this is so normal in our lives. It's so normal in literature, movies. It's just exciting to see it all, come to life. So then the next one would be meeting with the mentor. So at this point, the hero meets a guide or magical helper who offers training, knowledge, and advice. I think in all of our own lives, we can think of people who have done that, right? Like whether that's a therapist, a parent, a trusted teacher, a neighbor, like someone who just gives us that extra push to be like, you've got this, right? Like, you got this, go do it. And then it's going off. They're crossing the threshold. They're leaving and they're committing to the journey. Like if you're going to college, like, heck yes, I'm going. I'm doing it. I'm going to college, right? Like that's the next step. And then after that is when there's all the tests and the allies and the enemies, and you just encounter all that nitty gritty, right? So if we think to like the Odyssey, like that's when they would meet like the sirens, or when they would get stuck in the storms, or when their boat crashes, and like all of these different things. It like that's life, right? Like the sticky middle parts. I think we've referred to that before, or maybe just my own life. Like that's kind of the sticky middles. And then after that is the approach. It like gives the reader and the audience or the characters a time to plan and catch up, and like, okay, I learned this from this last conflict and now we're going to move forward, right? Like, let's do this. And then after that, it like goes to the ordeal is the greatest, darkest moment when you really have to pull through and use all of your grit to like, what did you learn from that messy middles to like get through this? And then you get your reward. And like Odysseus, when he gets to go home, right? He gets to go back to his family and he's safe. It's just so cool. It's like that whole concept of a hero cycle it's such a major theme in literature, movies, and in our lives.
Yeah, but I think the main part is you come out changed. Like if you look at the character
Yes.
development through the book, he develops. He's a round character, not a flat character, right? So like
Oh, you have to be. Yeah.
he has to be, but that's where like that's people. And I think sometimes we think we are flat, we are not dynamic, and that's where it's like, no, you are a very dynamic,
Oh, so
changing
dynamic.
person. You even
Yeah.
look at my baby month to month, he's a dynamic little dude. Like everything changes
Yes.
every week for him, and something grows, and now he's gotten really good at waving and smiling at people and saying
Oh, he's so
hi.
cute. He's like waving goodbye to the
Oh,
cars, and
so
yeah.
good. Yeah, and he loves it, and that's where it's like, but there's a change, and that's where there should be a change, but it's acknowledging that change, and it's acknowledging what changed you and
Yes.
what developed you. And I think that's where you can see it in the hero's arc really well, of like kids can and we can trace the story, so because it's very linear, and people's lives
Mhm.
aren't linear. Like people's lives are messy, and there's that hit and then you go down, and that hit and then you go down, and like, but in
Yes.
books and movies it is so straightforward, and you can be like, oh, that's why they changed and that's why they developed this. And like I tell like my clients, it's kind of like, when they're trying to track a serial killer and they have like all those lines all over this board.
All the like yarn boards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what my brain feels like when I'm connecting. Oh, this person changed from this event and it made them this way, but then they backslid with this, but then it came like I'm connecting all these different spots. And that's where a journey of self like discovery helps you with that, where you can see it, because you can't, it's not linear like a movie. It's not linear like a book like
No.
Odysseus. Like you have to start to see it where it's like, oh yeah, that happened and this made me this way and this is why I do this way. But you have to stop and reflect. Otherwise it's really hard to
I
find.
know.
It's
I
not
think
just
to
going to come
Olivia
to you.
Rodrigo, one step forward and two steps back.
Yeah.
It's
It's
so true. It's not linear. It's like you're
yeah.
gonna like go get the tests and the allies and the enemies and all of this like Odysseus did. And then you're gonna go backwards, you're gonna crash again. And then you're gonna remember, hey, I can do this. Like, I love that.
Yeah. So I love this quote because it actually referred to the Odyssey. I was like, that is such a good way to
I
explain.
didn't even see
Odyssey
that, but
means
yeah.
journey. Yeah. But every time I think of like self-improvement and journeys, I think of the Odyssey just like you. So it's funny, and like the hero's arc. Maybe it's because that's our original introduction. But the path to
Probably.
self-discovery is an odyssey that each individual embarks upon, a quest to unravel the layers of identity and unearth the essence of one's being. This journey is not merely a reflective sojourn, but a fundamental exploration that shapes our perceptions, choices, and interactions with the world. From Femi Oguniola. I don't know how to say it, from the
I don't
Medium,
know,
but we
say it,
will
yeah.
post this article. But I love that. Like, it's not like it's a journey that we all embark on, and it is a odyssey. Like the odyssey
Yep.
means like a journey with a goal, like if I remember right. And that's where it's like there's this mission, basically. It's like Mission Impossible. And then it's
Mhm.
like you're on this quest to go and discover who you are. And it's not just like understanding your basics, it's understanding the darkest depths of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I
And it
love
says right here,
that.
I just Googled like an alternate like definition of the of Odyssey, just the
Yeah.
word. And one that comes up is a long wandering or series of travels,
Yeah, I
which
love
is
that.
our
But
life is a long wandering and series of travels. And it never looks the way you expect it to. It always goes different.
well, mine looks
And we're
totally
always
how I
changing.
expect it to.
Yeah.
Totally. 100%. I
Mine looks the same as I always expected, obviously.
obvious. No, but that's
Obviously.
fine. um,
We can't even say it like pretending to be serious.
I know. I just I love that idea of like we're here to explore the perceptions, choices, and interactions with the world.
I love that.
Get it, Femi. You tell him.
Yeah. Here's a quote too that I had seen this the other day. I think I sent it on our family one, but this was from Hank Smith. And he had said, if you want real peace in your heart and mind, learn to process and appreciate life as it is rather than how you thought, expected, or hoped it would be. And I think that like goes in with that like hero cycle, right? Like just being like,
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna look different sometimes. Like accept it for what it is, learn your lessons from what's happened.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move forward. Like going
Yeah.
on that quest of your odyssey.
Acceptance does not always have to mean agreement too. You don't always like to have to like where you're at in the world or like your demons. And I just refer to that as like you don't have to like your trials, your hardships, or whatever you're dealing with, but
Yeah,
like
totally.
you do have to say like this is the facts, you know, and like that's very
Yeah.
two different very approaches. Like you don't have to be like, oh, this is great and I love it. Like no, nobody does.
This is
But
so cool.
this is the best thing ever. No, but you do
Being
have to
divorced is
honor it.
amazing. Like,
I don't I think that the best word I ever heard in grad school, which was so surprising we use it that much, was honor. And I like thinking about the word honor before I was in grad school, you know, it was like Mulan, you bring honor to us all. Like bring honor
yeah,
to your family. And that's how I thought about it. But then I thought about like how it was being applied to everything. Like you're honoring a client's story, you're honoring their journey, you're honoring their growth, and
I
you're
was just
honoring
gonna
their
say that.
history.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. It's like, yeah, you're giving a homage to it. You're giving it as like a gift and giving it a worthy spot instead of hiding it and pretending like it doesn't exist. And I think that's what,
Mhm.
you know, Carl Jung and all of these very wise people are stating is like understanding who you are, what you've been through, and how that's created you is honor, not dishonor. And I think
Amen.
oftentimes we don't want
Amen.
to look at it, you know.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I think I told you this right the other day. Like I had a therapy appointment and that thought of like honoring your journey, right?
mhm,
Like it was interesting talking to the therapist that day because he was like, you have learned some stuff from your journey that now you'll take with you into your new life, right?
mhm.
Like bring that with you. Like, yeah, this came from trauma or this came from a like, fight or
Mhm.
flight response or all of these things. But now take that with you and like honor that part of yourself. This is a part of who you are
Yeah.
and bring it with you. So if we go back to like the Odyssey, like Odysseus, those things that he learned, right?
Mhm.
Like he wanted to love his wife. He got through, the temptations or whatever. And like rather than like blaming himself for this, and he's like, no, this is what I want. This is what I'm going to move forward. Like it's kind of one of those like take that with you, honor your journey. Thank you, universe for that experience, and let's move forward. I
Yeah.
think that's so cool.
Yeah. Thank yourself for how you grew. And I think that's where a lot of I think that's where like because we're going to talk about resources that connect to this too. And I was just thinking about some of them, and a lot of them are just recognizing like this is what I've been through, this is my story, but this is also like what I got, and this is who I am now.
Mhm.
And I think that's the gift that we get from, you know,
And like,
doing this
how do you come out
process.
on the other side? Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
and
I
I
mean, we have some really great resources to share this month. Like, I wanna dive into that, but I'm like, "No, no, no, that's a whole nother
yeah, I was like
episode." But, like,
those are you'll get a good chunk, but um,
I love to talk about books, guys. I don't know if you've noticed this, but yeah.
yeah, you like book club. I was just thinking about the value of this. And I think that we can all like conceptually understand it, but understanding it to your core, there was this she's from the 60s, I think, or 70s, Karen Horney is how you say her name. She thought like she was studying neurosis, but what she realized at the end of the day was that the less understanding of yourself that you had, the more like distance you had between understanding your subconscious and your like self and why you do what you do, the more likely you were to develop a neurosis, like developed like severe
Interesting.
symptoms of anxiety, depression, all these other things. And I think that's just something that I really noticed is the less you take time to understand yourself, the more you're going to suffer. the more you're going to
Mhm.
actually like have to deal with as a repercussion of it than if you pause and take the time to try and understand, why do I do what I do, and what do I need to understand about myself at this moment. And that's, I think, hard for people to accept, which I can get that. It's not a fun process, but it is a valuable process.
But, like, I think it's so valuable because even at, like, a rudimentary stage, right? Like, my little guy, who's ADHD, remember the stimming, Taylor, like, where
Mhm.
we'll call him out on stimming, and at first he used to get kind of upset at us, like,
Mhm.
"No, I'm not. No, I'm not stimming," and we're like, "Dude, you just said the same thing, like, 10 times in a row. You're
Mhm.
totally stimming, or you're, like, doing the same body movements," or whatever it is.
Mhm.
But now it's interesting because he's able to connect that, right? He's
Mhm.
able to see, like, he has an awareness of himself. He knows what he needs, and he can call out his own behaviors, and he can call out other people's behaviors now at this point,
Mhm.
which is like huge growth from what it used to be. It was so funny because there was this song that kept playing when we were in Hawaii. Oh, it was some like 50s song, and it was like singing about the city. I don't even like New York, and over, he's like, "This lady's stimming." Like, she's just saying the same words over and over and over. And it just cracks me up because I'm like, he has an awareness on himself, of himself now,
Mhm.
enough that he can, like, teach this to other people. Like, yeah, that's
Mhm.
not quite what that meant, but, like, at the same time, it's
He's
like,
trying.
he's trying and he's owning his needs. He knows what he needs from that. It's so
Yeah.
cool. Like, we've seen so much growth just because of that. Mhm.
Mhm. We really have, though.
Yeah.
I love that. I just think that, I mean, this is literally my whole job, so I'm clearly an advocate for this subject, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
Okay,
Taylor,
so
how do you do this?
yeah, I was like,
where do we go? How do we do this?
application. I mean, this is definitely like a big subject to jump into for Hal. So we're
I know
gonna
those
do
are
like
my
some.
brief overview here.
I know, I was like, this is really a brief overview. I think like the resources that we talk about this month, as well as paired with like, so next episode, the next week is on unique ways to do self exploration. These are some like common ways that you can start diving into it. There are
Mhm.
so many different ways you can do this journey though for yourself. I think it just starts with the
Totally.
desire and like trying to work on your awareness.
I think so. And I
But
have been going on this path, like, for those of you who are listening, like, this is one of those, like, we can talk, like, this is I've been going through this, right? Like, what is my self-discovery? How do I define who I am? Like, it works.
well,
I
I
think
I
it's
really I really hope that like most people this would be a lifelong journey, right? But
oh, absolutely.
self
There will be times of
actualization
transition that yeah. Mhm.
self-actualization is like the top of the triangle for Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So that's where like your safety's met, your food is met, your relationships are met, like all of these basic. So don't beat yourself up. You're like, I can't even right now. Like Maslow is right. Like life is hard at times. And if you don't have some of your basic needs, then how are you ever going to expect yourself to be in this possible space to do these things? Right.
Yeah.
And that's
And
where
it's
like
taken me
cut
a long
yourself some
time to
slack.
get there. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, the fact
Yeah.
that I'm
You may have
actually
to
doing this
address
now is huge.
Yeah, you may have to address
Mhm.
the other things first and then get to that one. Like there's a
Yeah.
reason why it's at the tippy top of the triangle, right? But the Wellness Society suggested 6 things to consider when starting your journey with this, right?
Mhm.
The first one was like considering your values. And this is like, what do you prioritize in life? Like, what do you think about life? Like, what are your top things you want out of it? Like, just like at the end of the day, like, what's your guidelines? What are your own personal guidelines? Not what people told you, not like what your parents told you or anything. Like, what are your personal ones? And I think that one can be hard for a lot.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tradition of
Especially if you're
fathers.
breaking tradition. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, or cultural norms, stereotypes, all that. Yeah. What matters to
To
you? Why
you.
are you doing it?
Yeah. I tell all
Not
my
just because your
clients,
mom did it. Like,
if you can't sell me on it, then why are we talking about this? Like you got to sell me on it. And I don't have to buy into it. I need you to have a conviction to argue for it. Like that's all
yeah.
and if like that's where you usually can't articulate a good conviction argument if you don't actually have your own beliefs in it. And that's what I've noticed with my
Yeah.
clients. I'm like, hey, if you can give me valid reasons in your head why you are like, this is my value, sweet, that is your value. I love that for you. But if you're like, I don't know, because it sounds good, like, no, 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 boo boo. We go back. Like,
Yeah.
get
No, I
some
was
more
literally
belief
just
behind
talking
that.
to a friend about this recently, right? And like their whole life had changed. Like gone
Yeah.
from super religious upbringing and all this to like
Mhm.
leaving that religion and like their relationship had changed or all these things. And it was interesting talking to him because he was like his whole values had changed. He's like the things that I used to set such a pinnacle on like as a child or for the first like 30 plus years of his life were gone. right? Like he
Mhm.
had to consider his own values and he's doing great. Like
Mhm.
he has figured out like, hey, this is what's important to me, right? Like my family's most important to me, or like my continuing to strengthen those around me is most important to me, or
But
whatever it was. It
I think
shifted though. It was insane. Like
but
it
it
was
did it
good.
really
Yeah.
shift, or is that what was always driving the boat and they just didn't have the conscious. And
Yes.
then does that make sense? So, like, and that's where I think if you go back to Carl Jung's statement of until
Yeah,
you make
true.
the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and it will call it fate and you will call it fate. And I think that's where people are like, well, this bad thing happened to me or this thing. And it's like, well, maybe it's because your values are misaligned. And we learn this in grad school where
Yeah.
it's like figuring out and dicing apart, like when people have conflicting values, how do we start to talk to them about that? And how do we start to help them pull those apart and actually identify, do I align with this value that conflicts or not? And if I do, then how can I
Yeah.
make them coexist together?
Oh,
And
conflicting
that's where
values so hard.
conflicting values are super, super hard. But
Super
at the same
hard.
time, if you're just like trying to say this one's the one that I should go with, should not be a part of this like
Yeah,
conversation
and then it's
versus
like, but why? Why are you doing this? Like, yeah,
yeah. It shouldn't
yeah.
be a part of
This
your
whole, yeah.
conversation. Yeah. For considering your values, like, no. Like, yeah, just no. So um
It's
be
really
able to
hard to
tell it.
like be true to yourself by doing that. Like just doing it because that's the way it's always done, and this is what society says, or whatever. You're not gonna be happy.
It takes guts to be able to actually say I'm going to be outside of the guidelines. And I think like our society is a lot more compassionate on it now. It's still not, but it still is a lot more compassionate on it than it was 10, 20 years ago,
Oh,
like
totally. Like from when we
conversations
were
at
kids.
least are
Yeah,
being had,
yeah,
and I think that's where just you got to go with your gut. So that's the first
yeah.
one. Second one was acknowledging your strengths and weaknesses. Dude, you got to know what you're working with before you know what you're working with. Like you got to
Which
be
is hard
real.
sometimes though, to like take that
Yeah,
inventory of
nobody
yourself to
likes
be
that.
like,
Mhm.
oh, I really was not good at that. Like,
But
oh,
it's
I really wasn't,
interesting.
But
I have a harder time with clients knowing their strengths and their weaknesses. And I'm like, those are like our golden nuggets here, peeps, because they don't want to seem vain or they can't admit it to
oh, I have
themselves.
the same thing. I can easily tell you my weaknesses.
A lot of people can. Like
Yeah.
that's 90% of the population. Telling me your strengths, that one gets tricky tricks. So you got to know both because you got to use both to fight your battles. If you don't know both,
Mhm.
then what are we doing here? And if you're just saying their weaknesses, maybe those are actually strengths. Like a lot of people like my husband would probably be like, yeah, your ADHD is definitely a weakness, but I actually think my ADHD is a combo. I think it's a strength and a weakness.
Oh,
Like,
I think it can totally be a strength. Like,
mhm.
yeah. Mhm.
But it's because I've showed you that. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
but that's where, and it's great because you've learned it, but like a lot of other people haven't learned that about themselves. And I think that's where, it's just, yeah, two sides to every story.
Superpower. ADHD is a superpower. Like
Hmm.
it's yeah. Mhm.
Anxiety is a
We can learn a
superpower.
lot of things really fast. Yeah, what was the one the other day that I had talked about with you after that therapy session? Oh, like learning to compromise and stuff. Like that was like, right? And
Yeah.
like seeing more of like sides to a story, or like knowing when to kind of like stand up for myself or back down. That was huge. I never looked at that as a strength. I looked at that as
Yeah.
yeah.
There's been multiple times where you're like, that's not worth the battle. And I'm like, ugh, but you're right. Like,
Yeah.
for me. Yeah. And
But I
that's,
had always looked at it as like, man, now I'm passive because like growing up, I was always super like type A and like really kind of just like aggressive about things. But for me, that ended up becoming a strength. Wouldn't have acknowledged it that way until this week. We learn new things all the time.
yes, 100%. Um, the third one suggested is seeking out, or no, exploring your passions, like knowing what you like and what makes you happy or drives you.
Yeah. Which
I
is
think
so
that's
fun to like rediscover your passions too. Like, I've read some stuff lately, and a lot of the stuff I think if you look back to your childhood, it in your core, like, what did you really like doing? Right? Like what I have seen this come up a few times recently, and it's like, yeah, all those like Barbie houses and stuff that we used to build and play, like, I really do like decorating my house now, or like it's just different passions and stuff. Like,
yeah,
it's kind of cool,
yeah.
like to rediscover that about yourself.
Yeah, I think that we often think they're frivolous or they take up time or we just don't have the effort for it. But um I think that they drive a lot of your ability to find purpose. So
Totally.
yeah.
And joy. Like it just makes
Mhm.
you happy. So
Yeah. Seek outside perspectives, which is a good idea. Sometimes we're so stuck in our own way of thinking about ourselves and we hear others and how they view us. And then we can start widening that perspective for ourselves, which is a good
mhm.
one.
Make sure though on that one, I just want to add the caveat, like make sure that you are talking to trusted people though. Like if you're talking to someone who's gonna like tear you down or like has a harsher tone with you or any of that type of stuff, like be careful with that. Like, don't internalize the stuff that they're trying to tell you because that's not gonna help with your self validation. Like,
But at the same time, it could be their own conflicting things, like
but like if you're not in a place to like take that, that's what I'm saying. Like,
yeah. I think sometimes you like, yeah, yeah.
Taylor's trying
I
to think how
you
to say this now. Like, she knows what I'm talking about, but like,
I know what you're talking about, but at the same time, like when you're trying to understand yourself, you need somebody that's going to be capable and trusted to actually be real enough with you to challenge you and
okay, but
challenge
I
your
like
thinking.
that. The capable and trusted.
Yes, and that's where
Yeah.
like yeah, like you don't wanna go like therapy is great. We're trained on how to challenge, right? Like, and that's where like you really wanna be cautious on who you allow challenge you and how they're challenging you. If
Yes.
they're
That's what I'm
disrespectful, if they're
saying.
like
That's what I'm
they're
saying.
saying
Mhm.
you're a crap bag, like absolutely not. But if they're like, okay, maybe we need to like reevaluate this. Like, is this really helping you? Is this like such a great, like, um, that's probably a good challenger then. Like,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
like, don't always turn to yeah, just I like the, like, trusted and
yeah,
supportive people. Go
yeah.
go find them.
Capable, like, you really like, there's a lot of, like, look for credibility on the challengers, but at the same time, like, don't be afraid to be challenged either. I am actually a
No, I'm
therapist
totally all
that
about being
is
challenged. I'm all about that.
I'm a pretty, like, challenging therapist, like, I will definitely but my
Yeah.
clients all know it's fair and
But
it's
you're
only
a
called out
therapist. Like,
but I'm
that's the thing.
also but there's a difference too, right? Like, my clients always know, like, when I actually pull it out, it's fair, it's justified, and it's needed. Like,
Yes.
and so that's what you have to ask yourself, is it fair? Is it justified? And is it needed?
Yeah.
Versus like sometimes it's just not needed. Like I don't need people to always point out my flaws. I know, I'm aware, I know it was dumb, whatever. Versus like other times, like, yeah, that was needed. My husband's really
Yeah.
good at knowing what is needed. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We'll move on to the next one. But I'm just like, yeah.
I thought this one was interesting because I'm terrible at this. Making time for solitude.
Oh my gosh.
Solitude meaning like
Yes.
not stimming on things. I always have music going on. I always have stuff playing. I am a crazy bag. So I was like, "Ooh, yeah, I don't do well with that."
And this is something like I feel like in the last year I have actually gotten better at this. I'm not saying I'm great. Like this is like that 1% better, but like I have tried at night to like have less stimulus, right? Like stimuli around me. Like instead of falling asleep watching a show on an iPad or whatever, like I have used it as like a time of reflection and stuff. And it's just been really interesting. Like I'll sleep better at night or like
Mhm,
it like that time just to like be still is like, okay, I can do this.
mhm,
I think I may have shared the story in here before, but I remember the first time going to therapy how many years ago was he's like, "You just need to calm down." I think it was like 8 years ago. Have I
mhm.
shared this before on here?
Yeah,
Like, and he's like, "You just need to calm down." And I was like, "Be quiet and calm down." Like, what does it even mean? You know, like my body and my mind were like, couldn't even connect the dots on that. Like it
yeah.
was, yeah. Just try. Just try. Be still for a second. Find some solitude.
It's okay if you're terrible at it 'cause I am.
Yeah. Even if
Um,
it's like a minute or two. Like
yeah,
it's that 1% better, right?
it
Like
allows your brain to slow down. I think sometimes too, I don't want to. Like, I don't want to have self-reflection, and I know that's where my brain will go if I do it, and
that's
that's okay
and that
too.
used to be my problem. Like,
Yeah,
when I was dealing with a lot of, like, fight or flight response or, like, dealing with some really heavy life issues, I purposely did not allow my time for solitude just because I
yeah,
was like, "I know where my brain will go, and I don't wanna think about this. I don't wanna have to deal with, like, my reality and how heavy everything is."
yeah.
But at the same time, you need to do
It's
it even
needed.
during times of trauma and emotional turmoil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The last tip was honing your intuition, and I love this one. I remember reading a book, and I could not find it. I'm so sorry, guys, but they had talked about where, and I think it was an eating one, but they had talked about like dogs. We try and like I've tried really hard to maintain Koa's intuition. Like I don't yell at him for barking because he is very very capable at knowing who is safe and who's not safe. Koa's not a barker. Koa's not rude to people. But there have been like a handful of times, and I think you were on the phone with me one time. We were driving, and Koa lost his shiz, and Koa doesn't. He like is in the car all the
Yes, I
time.
remember
He's
that.
so
Mhm.
sweet, and he was like losing his mind. We were picking up my husband from the airport. I think I was pregnant. Koa was really like protective of me, and like even more aware of their surroundings when I was pregnant. And he saw this man he did not like whatsoever out of the window, and just starts. He lost his biscuits on him and was like growling and like posturing. And I was like, what is happening? And I look over and the guy was really creepy. So, like, was like,
Creepier than the guy at Value Village with the black eyes. Oof.
yeah, he was like about that level Brit. Like he did look like pretty and we were just in the car driving, but like Koa is so good at having this sense of like I like you, and he's so good at knowing like safe people. Like that was my test for my husband. Um was like, okay, does he warm up to him? Does he like him? And oh my goodness, they're best friends. But like, like it's just they have this gut instinct, and we all actually are gifted that. Like as humans, we have an amygdala that is very reactive and can sense safety or unsafe things, and there's even studies that show um if like your eyesight, like the occipital lobe, is not working in your brain can still sense unsafeness. So like there was chairs put out in this room for a person that didn't have eyesight with the occipital lobe working, but their eyes could still, so what happened is they couldn't project the image in their head, like that part was broken, but their
Mhm.
eyes could still filter in information, and the rest of the brain could use that information, which is really cool. So
That
like
is cool.
that, yeah, so it was like a very rare case, right? Like the
Yeah.
occipital lobe was damaged, so they couldn't see the image in their brain, but their brain could use whatever their eyes saw. And they sensed a chair in the room and they could walk around it because it was unsafe. So we have these internal functions within us, fight or flight mode. The amygdala is reactive. That helps us know what's good or not good for us. And like we can kind of sense it. They say like mommy intuition too is totally true. Like I know when my baby's naughty and doing
Yeah.
something. I'm like, oh, he's too quiet. Where is he? Oh yeah, he's digging through the dog bowl right now. Um, and that's where I think you have to start trusting that gut again, because society kind of like pushes that down in us, and like
And it's hard
our
sometimes.
doubts. Yeah, there's a lot
Yeah.
of like doubts, and
I've
there's a
had to
lot of
really been
things.
working on this. Like I was listening
Yeah.
to something right before we recorded this podcast about like owning your intuition and like using your agency as an individual to like trust yourself. Like
Yeah.
it's
It's
hard. It is hard,
so
that
hard.
self-validation, especially when you're squashed down from life. Like, yeah,
So
but
cool
do
though,
it.
like
And I think find ways to trust yourself in small ways. Like if you're not going to go trust yourself to do something big right now, right? Like find other ways to learn how to trust yourself. Like I don't know, whatever that
making a
might be.
decision in the store in a shirt, or and this is what I
Exactly.
tell my clients, like just go with your gut instinct. Give yourself 3 seconds, count down from 3, 2, 1, and do
Yep.
whatever your gut tells you to do if it's not like a damaging decision, right? Like bigger decisions, yeah, you need to think it through, but
Do you
like
remember like
buy a
when I
shirt.
was really
3, 2,
struggling
1.
with this and we went to IKEA and like we stood there and I looked at like beach chairs for like an hour? Do you remember this?
Yeah, did you buy those shares, Britt?
No, I never bought the chairs. I didn't trust myself to buy the chairs. I was so worried that my intuition was wrong. This was a few years back. And
Uh-huh.
this is probably when I was at the very bottom of my like
Yeah, you were struggling.
self
Yeah.
discovery and all of this. And it was like, that was rough. Like looking back on it now, and I'm like, and I remember downplaying it, being like, no, I just wanted to make the right decision, blah, 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 blah. And Taylor's like, no, you really struggled on that. Like, you should have just been able to be like, I need beach chairs. We're grabbing these. We're going. But
But
instead, it was literally an hour. I could not do it.
it's so interesting when you compare me and you, because my husband has always been like, Tay, you just like make a decision so quick and you're done. Like, dating my husband, I was like, I'm gonna marry him. I know this. Like, I think we were
Yeah.
talking for 3 weeks. And I'm like, this is my man. Like, this is my man. Or like I just knew it was a baby girl. Like this baby, I just knew it. Like I got pregnant, and then like after 8 weeks, I'm like, she's a girl. That's it. Like
Yeah.
it's done. And he was like, how do you know? I'm like, she is a girl. There's no other question. So then he just like went along with it because he learned on the last one. I was like, it's a boy. Like there's no question. It is a boy. And he was
Yeah.
convinced it was a girl, like convinced. It's like, no, this is a boy. And he's just learned like, I'm really good with gut instinct. And I think this is where like, that's why I value it so much, my dog and everything else. And then having somebody so opposite like you, it's been funny
I know.
because I am
Well, and there
very
are times
decisive.
where I can do that. Like, I can be very decisive, like, hey, we're buying this house as it is what it is, blah, blah, blah. But then there are other times where it's like,
But it's
if it's
rare.
something that's really about myself too,
I
I
know
don't,
it's
it's
rare.
hard. It's hard
Yeah.
because I have been burned on some of my choices. And
Yeah.
I think that I have like internalized that. Or, like I said earlier, like if you seek outside perspectives from unhealthy people, then that can like really diminish your ability
Yep.
to do that intuition because you don't trust yourself to do it because those outside forces can sometimes be so harsh that you just stop trusting yourself because they're like, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you always do this wrong. And you're like, they're right. I am always wrong. They're right. I always do make bad decisions on this. They're right. I don't know what I'm doing. Right. Like, start with the small things. Like, I have gotten better, right? Like, I feel like
Mhm.
I've made a ton of progress on
Yeah,
things.
you really
Like,
have. I just think it's so funny because I fairly like we are like a good case study of I have
Yeah.
guarded mine fairly well. And maybe there's like one or two things where I'll question it on things I don't know, like I feel like financial side is one that my husband and I'm like, okay, I'm going to refer to you on. But like other than that, I'm like, no, I go with my gut. And you're like the complete opposite. And I think it's
Complete
good to
opposite.
see how like the two, it's just
And I think
interesting.
part of it's my natural personality, right? Like, if we go back to the Enneagram and
100%.
all that, like, I
Yeah.
am a 6. I love that validation. I love just, like, knowing, like, am I making the right decision? Am I doing the right thing? Yeah, I'm doing the right thing. Like, but then at the same time, life circumstances, right? If we go back to
Mhm.
that hero cycle, there were times where I did not self-validate or, like, have that self-discovery that I needed, and it totally bashed me down. So, like, something that was already innately, like, acknowledging your strengths and weaknesses, something that could already be a weakness for me, I allowed it to, like, spiral out of control to the point where I couldn't even buy chairs at
Oh,
IKEA
yeah.
again.
Yeah,
Outside
that was
chairs, like, these weren't even anything crazy.
guys,
Like,
they were not anything important, and it took for
yeah, I never
I
even bought
think
them.
I was like, I'm ready for food now. I was really mad.
Yeah. So,
I think I
I
was
think this was great
actually
though.
I was dating my husband at the time, and he was in Utah. He was still living in Utah at the time, and I was, like, texting him, calling him, like, "Oh my goodness, this is ridiculous." Like, "Just tell her to get the dang chairs." We're both so, like,
And I
opposite
just
of
couldn't do
you.
it. I mean, that was like a bottom of the barrel for, and I do remember pulling myself up, like, yeah,
It was
yeah.
just
But
funny.
I started learning to do
Anyways,
more of my own intuition. Like,
yeah.
there's hope, right? Like, I'm not saying I'm
No,
great,
but
but
that's
I've made progress. Like,
I think on all of these, like, because if you look at different people, they're gonna have different areas. Like, this is my one strength area out of the other ones, like,
yeah.
again, strengths and weaknesses, you have others, and that's where it's just the balance. I think the 6 tips are really good. They also had an article on positive psychology today that had some really good resources as well that we will post for you guys. So I just liked like, there are a lot of ways to get started if on your own if you want to do this, like just asking yourself and thinking about a lot of this is just internal thinking about like kind of creating lists or
Mhm.
kind of just creating this like
Well, but then taking action on it, not just
dialogue.
thinking about it, but, like, then taking action on what you've already thought about.
But I
Like,
think that yes, but that's really hard then because then it's like, well, how do you take action? Where do you start taking
I
action? And
know,
that's where
true,
like
true, but
look for the guidance of a very
yeah.
wise person in your life. If you're spiritual, look for a spiritual leader. If you are therapists are great. Like I obviously am a big advocate for us, but like whatever you think is going to be your mentor or guide, like find a person that you feel like has the life that you want and can guide you on that style.
Go
That's what I
back to the
would say.
hero cycle.
Yeah, find the person that finds it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, awesome. Thanks for joining us today, guys. Hopefully this was helpful for you. Don't forget to follow us on social media on Uhane Counseling, and then you can find us on Spotify or Apple. Spread the word. And thank you. Thanks for listening, friends.
Bye.
Bye.